It's Cougar Sports Saturday.
That's caught! Touchdown! Stayed inside the boundary and gets in for 6.
Cougar Sports Saturday, a presentation of KSL Sports.
Richie right to the rim, driving score! He would not be denied!
BYU Sports Talk by Cougar fans for Cougar fans. Sponsored by Any Hour Services, Electrical, Plumbing, Heating, and Air. Your hosts are Mitch Harper and Kyle Ireland. On Utah's legacy home of the Cougars, KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM and 1160 AM.
Good afternoon, Cougar Nation. Welcome on into Cougar Sports Saturday here on the legacy home of the Cougars, KSL News Radio. I am your BYU Insider Mitch Harper. We got a loaded show for you over the next 3 hours. BYU football talk as the Cougars are turning the page on portal season, at least players that can enter the portal. As the portal window is officially closed, we'll hit on the players that have entered the portal and the ones that BYU has added. Cougs can still add players, keep that in mind. But the portal is officially closed, so you can breathe a sigh of relief if your favorite player, if you're hope that guy stays on board this season. Well, most likely he's going to be part of this BYU football team and running it back in 2026 if they have remaining eligibility. So we'll have a lot of portal talk coming up today. I'll be joined by 24/7 Sports Jeff Hansen with Cougar Sports Insider. He'll hop onto the program and we'll chop it up talking BYU football portal news and also get his thoughts on Kalani Sitake being locked into a long-term extension and being the face of BYU football for the foreseeable future. It's also a BYU basketball game day as the Cougars gear up for a top 15 clash in West Texas against the 15th-ranked Texas Tech Red Raiders, one of two programs since BYU joined the Big 12 that BYU has not defeated. That's Texas Tech, and BYU has a chance to wreck them and take down the Red Raiders tonight, 6 p.m. here on KSL News Radio and ESPN. Pre-game here on KSL begins at 5 o'clock from West Texas as the Cougs take on Texas Tech. I think maybe the toughest test since the UConn game back in November. So we'll break down that game. I'll be joined by a Texas Tech basketball insider, Nathan Geese from the Lubbock Avalanche Journal, to get the lowdown on this Red Raiders team that, despite their 4 losses, really good basketball team. Once again, that's kind of the calling card with Texas Tech. They're just good across the board. Same can be said for BYU. And I'll be with you over the next 3 hours, breaking it all down, riding solo here on the program today as Kyle Ireland, my co-host, he's out with some to attend to a personal matter with family. So just me over the next 3 hours. So appreciate all of you for being on board of the program today, whether it's on the old school radio dial 102.7 FM or 1160 AM, the KSL News Radio app, kslnewsradio.com, kslsports.com, the KSL Sports app, or on demand on podcast. However and wherever you're listening to the show, appreciate you for always supporting Cougar Sports Saturday. It's not too far off, it feels like, that BYU football will be here before we know it. I'll admit, the portal officially closing yesterday, it feels kind of like you could start to truly forecast what these teams are in 2026. And it's crazy to say that considering the 2025 football season hasn't even ended for college football, as Miami will take on Indiana coming up on Monday night. Still, the portal closing is a significant mile marker in the construction of the 2026 season. And by all accounts, BYU experienced a net gain. I think it's a decisive net gain for BYU. It was a W. It was a win in the portal. So BYU lost 13 players to the portal. So guys that were on the 2025 roster that exited the program and are in the portal. Keep in mind, some of these guys, you're probably hearing the name thinking, he didn't play last year. That's kind of a theme a little bit. So here are the players that left BYU into this portal window. Che Bryant-Strother, really good football player. Linebacker, was coming on strong in fall camp. Then he suffered an ACL. He's been reportedly into the portal. That, according to 24/7 Sports. Che Bryant-Strother is a stud, and hopefully he can find a landing spot. He's a really good player, and He would have been a luxurious depth piece for BYU, but now he goes portaling. Pokayawa Hunga, if you're familiar with that name, he was a guy that was at fall camp for one day this past fall, and then he left due to personal reasons. And so BYU's already experienced life without Pokai Hunga in that running back unit, but he is going portaling. Max Alford, linebacker. He was the backup inside linebacker to Sialia Serra in replace of Che Bryant Strother. He goes portaling, and he lands at Michigan. His uncle is the running back coach at Michigan, and I think Jay Hill was really a big fan of Alford, and really good player, too. He got banged up late in the season. It was the TCU game, but up until that point, I thought he was solid for BYU. 6'1", 230. He goes off to the Maize and Blue. Tavion Beasley, cornerback, backup nickel for BYU, 5'10", 180. He lands at USF. He's going to be playing for the Bulls along I-4. So you go westbound from UCF, where BYU is going to go this fall. Westbound on I-4, Tavion Beasley is going to be holding it down in Tampa. Sione Hingano, offensive lineman. He's still in the portal. Sani Tuwala, a defensive lineman who I was really high on coming out of the JC ranks. There were some comparisons to that of Ziggy Ansah. And the athleticism is undeniable with Sani Tuwala. Hasn't landed yet in the portal. Tucker Kelleher, a one-year tight end, redshirted this past year, buried deep on the depth chart. He's in the portal. Ignacio Tupo, offensive tackle. He lands at San Jose State. LaMason Waller, a redshirt wide receiver. He lands at Southern Utah. McKay Hillstead, quarterback. He ends up and boomerangs his way back to Utah State. He's going to play for Robert and Bronco Mendenhall up in the Cache Valley. And dare I say, I think that's going to be good. I think McKay Hillstead's going to be a good player for the Aggies. Marcus McKenzie and his brother Dominique McKenzie, they go portaling. Marcus, the cornerback, he ends up at Utah State with Bronco. Remember, they were once a Virginia commits, both of them. So it's no surprise that Marcus goes up to Utah State to play for Bronco. Dominique McKenzie, though, he ends up at San Jose State. And then Jake Griffin, offensive lineman, lands at a Big 12 school. He's off to Arizona, the hometown team for him. 6'5", 305. Jake's a good player. He's going to end up with the Wildcats. For BYU, the additions in the portal. And this is where I think, again, the net gain for BYU. Last night, Roger Saliapaga, Oregon tight end, commits to BYU. Former Orem High product. Hasn't played much in 2 years at tight end. Buried in a talented tight end unit at Oregon. He now comes to BYU, 3 years to play 2. Javen Williams, a cornerback from Mississippi State, 6'2", 185, primarily a backup corner for the Bulldogs in the SEC. Maybe he could contend for some playing time, but most likely a depth piece for BYU after that of Trey Alexander and Shmev Johnson. Zach Yamauchi, Stanford offensive lineman, he joins the program. Cade Uluave, star linebacker, the #1 linebacker transfer in 2026. Big-time talent. We'll talk more about him throughout the show. That's a huge get, though, for the Cougars. I mean, you're talking Michigan, Texas. They wanted this guy, and BYU gets him. Jake Clifton, Kansas State linebacker. He hasn't played at K-State in 2 years. Why? Because he served a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So, perfect fit. Jake Clifton comes to BYU. He's a good linebacker, too. He was highly productive in 2023 for the Wildcats. Kyler Casper, wide receiver from Oregon. We talked about him last week. Junior Sia, offensive tackle from Utah State. Paki Finau. Man, this guy, I'm bullish on him. 6'5", 310 out of Washington. Finau is going to be one to watch. Believe it. And then Walker Lyons, who we discussed last week as well. Former tight end at USC. He comes to Cougs, and I think he's your tight end 1 in 2026. That's the transfer portal activity for BYU. Let's take our first time out. We'll dive in deeper into the guys that I think are the impact players for BYU in 26, and maybe some positions still of need for BYU. It's Cougar Sports Saturday, and it's powered by KSL Sports. Cougar Sports Saturday here on KSL News Radio, your legacy home of the Cougars. I am your BYU Insider Mitch Harper. Happy to have you on board to the show wherever you're listening to the program today on this Saturday, January 17th, a BYU basketball game day, but we're talking some BYU football. We discussed the list of players in the portal and guys that BYU has added out of the portal. Let me just say, the players that are the impact guys in 2026, you could argue that every one of them potentially has a big impact. But the impact guys to me are the following for BYU that you can almost put them in Sharpie. They are going to have an impact in 2026. Keita Uluave. I mean, say less. 6'1", 235. This guy is a madman. The way that he pursues the football, outstanding speed, an incredible athlete. He was a do-it-all guy at Mountain Ridge High School here in the state of Utah. He comes back home playing for BYU. I think he is going to be a terror to opposing Big 12 defenses. He was first team All-ACC. Now he steps in as potentially a leader too. And I think that's going to be one of the interesting things on him. Does he have the similar impact that Keanu Tanavasa had on the locker room when he showed up? When Keanu rolled in last year, instant, game changer. Well, not maybe game changer, probably just a guy that enhanced the culture that was already existing at BYU. Keita Uluave, I think he's got to be someone that steps in and enhances it as well. I think when you're adding a guy of his caliber out of the portal, you not only want him to be a great football player, and he's going to be that, but enhancing the culture and the locker room, that's a big thing with BYU. And that's why you saw a lot of retention from this football roster navigating the 2 weeks in the portal. BYU didn't lose many guys. Guys of substance, they're all running it back if they have eligibility remaining. But Keita Uluave will have a massive impact on this BYU football team. Paki Finau, I teased it. I think he's someone that could play, he could be a tackle, he could be a guard, he could play any position along the offensive line. And BYU's recruited this guy for years. And when he was coming out of high school, so this was someone that BYU's thought highly of for many years. And he finally comes to BYU. And, he had a handful of starts for Washington last season at guard. And I wouldn't be opposed to him playing guard because you look at the offensive tackle position for BYU, you've got Andrew Gentry, who could probably be the left tackle potentially next year, maybe. He was right tackle this past season, but we've often seen BYU switch guys over from right to left and work their way over. Maybe that could be in the cards for Andrew Gentry. But you've also got Bot Mulitalo, a true freshman, coming in, Andrew Williams, Ethan Thomason, and Paki Finau could be in the mix there too. But and Junior Sia, I think he could have an impact as well. But I just think Finau's got the build, the experience at the power forward level that says he's going to have an instant impact. But Junior Sia too, don't be surprised if he has an instant impact as well. The third guy that I would point to that I'm almost surely confident will be outstanding for BYU is Walker Lyons. 2 years of eligibility remaining. Older brother to Ryder Lyons, the quarterback who was at the basketball game earlier this week. And gosh, that sent people into a fit on social media, did it not? But Ryder's now off to the MTC in Mexico, getting ready for a Spanish-speaking mission in Orlando, Florida. But Walker's going to hold it down at BYU at the tight end spot. I think he's your tight end one upon arrival. And I think he's going to be an excellent pass-catching tight end for the Cougars. He's a good blocker, too. I mean, I think you're looking at Walker Lyons and turning him into a bona fide NFL draft pick. That was the expectation when he was a high school recruit. 4-star guy. The whole West Coast recruited Walker Lyons. It was USC, Stanford, and BYU were kind of viewed as the top three. He ultimately went to USC. I think he was committed at one point to Stanford. Then he flipped over to USC. Now he's off to BYU. And Walker Lyons, I just think, is a great fit for BYU's offense. And if he can replicate what Carson Ryan did last season, that's outstanding. But maybe he can take it to a higher level. I think Walker Lyons could do that for BYU. I'm also really intrigued by the rest of the portal class, but I think those are the three guys that you point to that instantly make an impact in 2026. Everyone else, I think you want to see these guys be at a minimum on the 2 deep when BYU kicks it off this fall. I think that's the type of strategy BYU took with these portal additions. BYU is never going to be the 20, 30, 40-plus transfer portal class. They did that in 2023, and they did it to kind of level up the talent pool heading into the Big 12, and I think they did because they went so many years and so many recruiting cycles with recruiting long game forecast. Guys that maybe in 3 or 4 years we'll see them become something because they would gray shirt, then they would go on a mission, then they would red shirt. That'd be 4 years before they'd ever touch the field, potentially play in a game. And now you're getting more impact guys. You still have missionaries. They still are a key piece to the BYU football roster. But now you're getting a lot of signings where it's a nice blend, where it's not just a bunch of sign and sends. Like you look at the 2026 class, which has a top 25 ranking next to its name on pretty much all the recruiting services from the high school ranks. About half are sign and sends. Others are going to be joining this year. So I think there's a nice blend of roster construction. It's created this pool where BYU doesn't have to ever really sign 30 or 40 players in the portal. These past 2 weeks for a lot of programs, it's a nightmare because you're almost building out the entire roster in these 2 weeks. Now, again, you can still add guys between now and really whenever for your academic calendar to go get some new players. But the bulk of it, you look at the top players that are the impact guys in the portal, they're off the board in these 2 weeks. Now the rest of the portal remaining available guys are primarily players that are maybe going to be depth pieces for a roster. So you don't want it to be the complete identity of your team. Now, you look at some of the teams that are in the national title, a big bulk of their rosters were some transfers. Kurt Cignetti flipped that thing from James Madison over to Indiana, and it was an overnight sensation. Miami has been a massive player in the portal the last handful of years. But for BYU, I think retention is the biggest piece, and they hit that out of the park, especially with a coaching change at the defensive coordinator position at a coach that many Cougar fans thought maybe he's better than the head coach, which I always disagreed with because Kalani is BYU football to the core. I mean, this program, this culture, this success, it all goes back to Kalani Sitake. And I think this offseason clearly made that clear by the players, like this is the man they want to play for, and that's Kalani Sitake. Regardless of who the DC is, regardless of who all the position coaches are, we're playing for Kalani Sitake. And that was evident by the retention that BYU had and also the financial commitment that BYU's made to building out its roster. That's elevated as well. That's leveled up. BYU wants to be a national player. They're chasing the college football playoff, and you're seeing that with the way that they're building out this team. And it's a lot of reason for excitement for 2026 and beyond with this BYU football program. Let's take a break. We'll get to more BYU football talk around the corner. Let's hit on the defense. Could this defense, with all the retaining pieces, could they be better in 2026 with new defensive coordinator Kelly Papinga? We'll discuss that next here on Cougar Sports Saturday.
It's Cougar Sports Saturday.
That's caught! Touchdown! Stayed inside the boundary and gets in for 6.
Cougar Sports Saturday, a presentation of KSL Sports.
Richie right to the rim, driving score! He would not be denied!
BYU Sports Talk by Cougar fans for Cougar fans. Sponsored by Any Hour Services, electrical, plumbing, heating, and air. Your hosts are Mitch Harper and Kyle Ireland. On Utah's legacy home of the Cougars, KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM and 1160 AM.
Cougar Sports Saturday rolls on here on this Saturday, January 17th. I am your BYU Insider Mitch Harper, rolling solo today. Appreciate you for all being on board to the show this afternoon. Big day ahead for BYU basketball as they take on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Tip-off at 6 p.m. But we're talking BYU football, and there's a lot of talk about the BYU defense. And my producer, Nate Slack, posed the question, this week when we were prepping for the show, could BYU's defense in 2026 be better than 2025? And the 2025 edition of BYU's defense was really good. They were third in the Big 12 Conference in scoring defense, allowing only 19.1 points per game. That's good for 19th nationally in college football. So safe to say what Jay Hill built over the past 3 years was really good for BYU. The Cougars were excellent the past 2 years. I think the 2024 defense statistically was better because they were the number one defense in the Big 12. But I will say the sacks this past season, the takeaways, there's a lot to like with what BYU has been the past 2 years defensively. And I think a lot of Cougar fans fear that, well, not currently fear, but when Jay Hill left last month, they feared that his defense would go with him. I disagree. Kelly Poppinga steps in as the defensive coordinator, and Coach Poppinga has nearly 2 decades of experience under his belt. Now, the big question I have for Kelly Poppinga is going to be just handling play calling. You know, Jay Hill had an incredible knack and feel. Same with General Guilford when it came to certain play calls. He was really good at that, Jay Hill was. And that might be an art that Kelly Poppinga has to develop. But in terms of knowing defensive football at a high level, I think Kelly Poppinga is going to do a really good job. And he's surrounded by a good defensive staff with DeMario Warren, who's already making an impact on the recruiting trail with landing the transfer from Mississippi State in Javen Williams. And then you've also got Gary Anderson as a senior analyst. You know, there is a lot of resources, and Kalani Sitake, a former defensive coordinator in his own right, to help Kelly Poppinga along the way. But Kelly Poppinga, he inherits a great foundation with so much retention from this past team that was really good defensively. But I think Kelly Poppinga's got to add his own unique flair to this defense because he was around some great defenses, whether as a coach and a player under Bronco Mendenhall, and he's been connected to some great defenses the past 3 years at BYU as well in the Jay Hill staff. So again, will this defense in 2026 be better? You got to look first at the players that you lose. In 2025's defense, you lose Jack Kelly. That's a massive loss because he was the leading sack artist for this BYU team the past season. First BYU player in 10 years to reach 10 sacks in a season since Bronson Kafusi, the first to do it in the Kalani Sitake era. Took a while, took 10 seasons for that to happen, but Jack Kelly kind of broke the ceiling and finally broke through and got that done. That's a big loss. But you already experienced life a little bit without him in the Pop-Tarts Bowl as he was sidelined. He could have probably played, but he was dealing with the shoulder. Jack Kelly was sidelined. So you already experienced a month of prep without Jack, and you bring in Cade Uluwave from Cal, who's going to be a monster. 4.4 40 speed, great closing speed, just like Jack Kelly. I don't want to say he's a Jack Kelly clone, but similar tendencies to that of Jack Kelly. Of course, you return Isaiah Glasker as well. And then you bring back Nusi Taumoi-Peau, who had that forced fumble with the foot against Georgia Tech. And, of course, Nusi could play the edge spot. I mean, he could do a lot of different things in BYU's defense. The addition of Cade Uluwave, though, gives BYU so much versatility defensively. But to answer the question, do I think BYU's defense could be better? I think they will be in 2026. You lose Jack Kelly. You lose Tanner Wall. That's a big loss. Tanner Wall was a stud. I was so high on him going into last season, and he panned out in a big way. Tanner Wall was outstanding for the Cougars. He's a big loss. John Taumoi-Peau also gone. You could argue maybe he was the MVP of the defensive line this past season. Now, he's looking to get a JUCO year. Remember Diego Pavia, the Vanderbilt quarterback who sued for an extra year of eligibility, claiming that his JUCO year shouldn't have counted against his eligibility because it limited his earning potential as an athlete. Maybe Taumoi-Peau gets something, but I'm never going to bank on the NCAA to give a BYU player a waiver. I mean, I'm still of the thought of Yoli Childs losing 9 games 6 years ago over paperwork. Isn't that crazy to say? Paperwork. That was just 6 years ago. You would think with how the NCAA operates now, that was 50 years ago, with how much has changed with handling suspensions and players and waivers and money and everything that of the sort. Now we've got NBA draft picks playing in college basketball. I digress. And BYU's got a former G League guy and former European players. Anyway, so John Taumaipeau, he'd like to get an extra year, but I'm going to say he's gone. If he comes back, what a bonus. What a luxury that would be, but I'm going to just mentally tell myself he's gone. Logan Latui also gone. Maury Bamba, Jaden Dunlap, Kafusi Pofoke. Everyone else pretty much of significance is back. And I think that's why I'm going to say 2026 is going to be a better defense because you have so much returning. Keanu Tanavasa, he's back. Trey Alexander, Evan Schmev Johnson, he's back. Glasker, Nusi Taumaipeau, Sialia Serra, they're all back. Anisi Purcell, he's going to be better as a defensive tackle in year 2 at BYU. You bring back some promising defensive linemen. Bodie Schoonover's heading into his senior year. Excited for what Bodie can do in his final season at BYU. But how about Tausili Akana? The jump that I'm expecting to see from Tausili, I want to see a big leap from Akana. You saw it from the midway point to the end of the year, his pass rushing ability. Maybe a little bit of a one-trick pony. Can he become more than just a guy that go get the quarterback? More nuance to his game. Can he get that in his repertoire? Hunter Clegg's going to be a monster. He's going to be that bull rusher. He's going to probably take over the Bodie Schoonover spot after Bodie's done, but big future. You're talking Tyler Batty type potential, maybe better than Batty potentially with Hunter Clegg. And you bring in some heralded freshmen from either returning missions or signees like a Braxton Lindsay, Devo Tuataga off a mission, David Tangalanu, who's already enrolled in winter semester, Cepha Brown's a redshirt, who I think's got a big future ahead. I mean, the defensive line, too, I mean, with Justin Kirkland comes back, Alvin Puefua, a redshirt former Hawaii transfer. There's so much good talent. And a lot of the names you're probably thinking, who are these guys? Why are you getting hyped about these guys, Mitch? But I get excited about them, and I think that's why, to its core, why I believe the defense, even with some tweaks to the staff and obviously Jay Hill to Kelly Papinga, that's a big change. That's a big change. But I think what gives me optimism is because there's so much talent and depth that Kelly Papinga inherits, and he's already added and had some big-time wins already by getting a Cade Uluwave. Because you look through this defense, you know, it wasn't too long ago. I brought up 6 years ago with Yoli Childs. 6 years ago when BYU football was navigating a COVID season and going 11-1, they were a team that you'd go through after the starting lineup or maybe the top 22. It was a lot of guys that didn't have any sort of power conference interest. I go through this roster now, piecing together what the 2026 roster is going to look like. I mean, every position. You're talking about guys that had other Power 4 programs interested and offering those players. And to me, that just kind of speaks to the improved depth, the quality of the depth in this roster. And it's been a common theme every single year. I feel like it's getting better. There's been some years where I don't feel like it's been better than years prior. And that's kind of showed itself in seasons where maybe it was just kind of subpar, 7-6, 8-5 in the Kalani era. But this is one of the most talented rosters I've ever seen put together at BYU because it's a nice blend of retention, proven commodities that have done it at a high level in a conference that is really good. Even though the powers and the voices of the sport say this league is irrelevant, it's a really good conference for anyone who wants to follow it. And this defense is going to be excellent. I'm really high on this group, and I think they've got the ability to withstand potential injuries too and still ideally not skip a beat. That's been one of the big things too the past couple of years is that when you do get hit with injuries, the machine continues to move. And I think you've got the personnel to make that happen next season because you look at safety. You got Raider DeMooney and you got Falatau Satuala, but you've also got Tommy Parasis. You've also got Matthias Leach, who's going to be a really good player. You got some incoming freshmen like a Kenan Pula, who had one of the greatest interceptions you'll ever see from any level of high school or football player, period. The way he picked off that pass in the Utah high school state championships. Jaron Kalama. I mean, there is a lot of good talent at safety. So again, you got depth. You got talent. Linebacker, you got a bunch of talent. Ace Kafusi comes back. Ephraim Asiata. Pearson Watson's going to be a good one. Tyler Payne. Jake Clifton from K-State. Miles Hall, who's got starting experience the past 2 years. There is a lot to like. So BYU's defense in 2026, even with the loss of Jay Hill, and that's a big loss. Jay's outstanding, and I think he's going to do great things at Michigan. But Kelly Papinga is ready for this, and he's got a roster that's built to give him a chance to have instant success, and I think they're going to be very successful. Now, will they be the best defense in the Big 12? I don't know. But I also feel pretty confident. I don't know if Texas Tech is going to be the level of a David Bailey, Romello Height, Lee Hunter level of talent for Tech next season. They got some studs in the portal as well, but I don't know if they're going to be to that, elite level that they were this past season. Tech's defense was incredible. One of the best defenses I've seen in college football the last 5 years. Could BYU's defense be the best one in the Big 12? Maybe. But I feel pretty confident they're at a minimum, top 3. I definitely feel like top 2. And I think they're going to be an outstanding group that's going to be hard to score on next season. Let's take a break. We'll get to more BYU football talk and some potential rule changes in college football and how that could impact BYU. It's Cougar Sports Saturday, and it's powered by KSL Sports. Welcome back into Cougar Sports Saturday. Mitch Harper here with you. Coming up on Monday night, the College Football National Championship, Indiana versus Miami. Is everyone in agreement with me that this season stretches out too long? Too long. Look, I love college football. I love it. College football is my favorite sport. But why are they playing college football games on January 19th? That is way too long. This season is stretching out far too long, and everyone that's a sports fan seems like they've gotten distracted. They're focusing on the NFL. Maybe they're tuning into basketball now because it just seems like all the momentum is gone. College football has got to fix its postseason because this thing stretches out way too long. They've got to figure out a way to get this thing done by January 8th. 1 week after New Year's Day, that was traditionally the BCS national title window. Maybe that was sooner, but the 4-team playoff era, I think that's as late as it should be. We should not be getting to the middle of January, the winter semester for the academic calendar. We should not be having football played. It needs to be done by January 8th going forward. When the next playoff iteration comes together, they've got to figure out a way to get this thing done as soon as possible. And the perfect answer is moving up the season, getting week 0 to become the new week 1, and then having a week 0 that's earlier, middle of August. No one is going to be opposed to college football kicking it off in middle of August. I know there'd be some hot games. Playing a BYU home game in August, that sounds brutal with heat. But stretching out the season this late is terrible. Like, everyone's losing interest. They have tuned out. And I'm excited to watch Indiana-Miami. Like, don't get it twisted. I'm going to watch on Monday, but am I fired up about it? No. Like, the season, I'm ready to turn the page to 2026, yet we're still dealing with 2025. Needs to be fixed. One thing that the coaches are trying to fix, though, in college football, changing the redshirt rule. Right now, the redshirt rule is 4 games. A player can participate in games in a season, 4 games, and still maintain its red shirt. Well, coming out of the coaches' convention, the AFCA, which Kalani Sitake is a member of the board of trustees for that AFCA, American Football Coaches Association, they are recommending redshirt seasons include up to 9 games played. Wow. Which to me says, why don't you just give these players 5 years to play 5? and eliminate the whole redshirt thing and just say you got 5 years, however you want to play. That to me would be the move. Just get rid of the redshirt thing. Just say you got 5 and 5. And then it's done. And for athletes that still want to serve a mission, you got the exception with the 2 years, and you got that 7-year window. For folks like myself who've been covering BYU for a lifetime, the whole 7-year window is nothing new to me. I think for a lot of people that cover college football, they're still kind of figuring out, like, yeah, you do have 7 years to kind of operate and work this thing through. We know that because of the 2-year missions. But I think 5 and 5 would be perfect, and then you got that exception for the athletes that serve a mission. That's great. 9 games and a red shirt, what's the point of that? I mean, because the red shirt still, they don't even count with the postseason. Just let them have 5 years. I don't know what you would call, what you have, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, and graduate. Maybe that's the move. That's what you would term the classifications at that point. Man, you go 5 years at college, you better be getting multiple degrees if you're an athlete. Take advantage of that opportunity. That would, to me, be the move that college football needs to go to. But 9 games for a red shirt, no, just give them 5 years. And I think everyone would be on board with that. And I think the key then would be you better have contracts that can lock down personnel for at least 2 years. Get these guys on 2-year contracts that you invest heavily into to make sure that you're going to get them at least almost half of their time in college football. And then if it doesn't work after those 2 years, then, both parties might need to part ways. But at least 2 years. And I think this transfer portal, we start to see a little bit of the slowdown of the movement. I know it doesn't feel that way, but it does seem like players are getting more education, and they're thinking, you know what? Why leave this roster spot where I'm guaranteed to make money with revenue share? So, interesting times in college football as it continues to evolve more and more as the years go by. We're taking a break. On the other side, I'll get to Jeff Hansen, my conversation I had with him from Cougar Sports Insider. We're talking BYU football portal on the other side here on Cougar Sports Saturday.
It's Cougar Sports Saturday.
That's caught! Touchdown! Stayed inside the boundary and gets in for 6.
Cougar Sports Saturday, a presentation of KSL Sports.
Richie right to the rim, driving score! He would not be denied!
BYU Sports Talk by Cougar fans for Cougar fans. Sponsored by Any Hour Services, electrical, plumbing, heating, and air. Your hosts are Mitch Harper and Kyle Ireland. On Utah's legacy home of the Cougars, KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM and 1160 AM.
Welcome back into KSL News Radio and KSL Sports YouTube page, Cougar Sports Saturday and Cougar Tracks crossover here. Mitch Harper with you, and joined now by Cougar Sports Insider, part of the 24/7 Sports Network. You can check out his bylines there at cougarsportsinsider.com and on X, Rakutu10. He's Jeff Hansen, and we're talking some BYU football. Our national nightmare is over, Jeff. The portal window has finally closed. All the torture that people go through with this portal, it wasn't too bad. In fact, I think it was a pretty good thing for BYU. How would you assess these past 2 weeks for the Cougars?
Yeah, I think it was great for BYU. I mean, first and foremost, you retain Kalani, and I get that that's not portal and all that stuff, but I don't know if people realized when Kalani was flirting with Penn State, how big of a loss that would have been, right? I mean, even if, the ascent or I guess the progression plan, probably Jay Hill's the head coach, all this stuff, a lot of guys probably go to Penn State with Kalani Sitake. I just think that that's what happens. But as it is, Kalani stays, Jay Hill then leaves, and the roster still stays intact. I mean, that really should say, speak volumes to people about how important this coaching staff, how important Kalani is and the culture and all that stuff is to these players. I mean, they stayed to play for Kalani Sitake, and I think that's awesome. From a recruiting standpoint, the commits all stayed, the roster all stays. I mean, honestly, it's huge. The retention job and keeping guys at BYU and in Provo was enormous by Kalani Sitake. And then you look at the additions that they made. It's not one of these portal classes like you're seeing at some of these schools where they're adding 30, 40 different players. It's pretty tactical. BYU knows what they're doing. They've got a strategy. They're looking for some very specific players, and they got them. And I think it's really hard to have too much heartburn about what BYU's done in the portal so far. They've done a really good job.
It does feel that way, and it sure feels like since 2023, when they had that massive influx of portal, they have learned a lot of lessons into how to navigate the portal. I think you bring up a good point about a lot more strategic with the portal acquisitions. Who are the guys in this 9-man commitment group in the portal? There could be more in the near future, but who are the guys that you really like in this cycle that BYU has added?
Yeah, I mean the headliners are going to be Walker Lyons and Kedu Luave, right? I mean those are the 4-star guys, and they deserve it. Walker, I think, is an ideal fit. I think most BYU fans, they remember Walker Lyons when he was at Folsom High School as a senior. He's developed quite a bit during his time at USC, and if you watch his film at USC, he looks a lot like Carson Ryan. He's really emerged as a blocker. I don't think he's quite to that level of a blocker that Carson Ryan was for BYU this past year, but he's a lot better than he was when he was coming out of high school. And then he's an elite pass catcher. So Walker's going to deserve all the praise. Kedu Luave, the Mountain Ridge kid, huge. I mean, that's an enormous addition. I really like what BYU's done at the offensive line. And I think you look at those 3 guys that BYU brought in, I think you expect 2 of them to start. 3 of them could, in Junior Sia out of Utah State, Paki Finau from Washington, and then Zach Yamauchi out of Stanford. I look at Finau and Yamauchi as guys that probably start. Paki Finau's got some Austin Leosa to him that I think he can play outside. He can play inside, did play inside at Washington, but has that tackle frame. We know that Coach Woods loves that versatility and being able to move guys around. So I think these are 3 huge additions along the offensive line. BYU had a gap there, and then they did lose some depth in Iki Tapuo and Jake Griffin to the portal, so they needed to backfill that. I love that offensive line class. I think these are ideal fits for BYU simply because of that versatility, that multiplicity that Coach Woods has valued since he got here.
Let's talk that through the offensive line. So you bring back Gentry, who's running it back. You got the first team all Big 12 center running it back in Bruce Mitchell. How else would you fill out this offensive line in 2026? Getting ready for, we're about 230 days away. Who's counting? But September 5th, what would be your starting 5 of that O-line spot?
I'm looking at a guy like Andrew Williams to really develop and emerge as a potential starting tackle. The easy comparison that I think we all made when he was coming out of high school last year was Blake Freeland. He's huge. He's raw. He's super athletic. He looked a lot like Blake Freeland. I hope he emerges as a starting tackle, because if he does, then Paki Finau, you can just slide him in wherever you need him. Whether, if he beats out somebody at tackle, great. But if you need to kick him inside and he plays guard, all the better. I think that Paki Finau is probably the guy with the highest upside of those portal offensive linemen. So I'm plugging him in somewhere along that starting line. So I think my ideal starting line, it's Gentry and Williams on the tackles, Mitchell, of course, in the middle. I'm putting in Paki Finau and then Zach Yamauchi as those guards flanking on either side of Bruce Mitchell. I don't know that I have a preference of who plays left, who plays right. They're both really good, and they're both just dominant run blockers. I think they both start inside.
And the fantastic thing is, too, is you still got Joe Brown. You still got Ethan Thomason. Thomason got a little bit shaken up in bowl prep, so we'll see on him. And he was dealing with that ankle in fall camp. But you've got Kyle Safara-Choke. You've got Caden Chittister. I mean, this is a deep football team, and I think what you're seeing with the personnel we just laid out on the offensive line, I think you can apply that to many different positions on this team heading into 2026. What's your thoughts on the depth that Kalani and his staff have built out for 2026?
Yeah, I really like the depth. The linebacker room, I think, is a great example of how BYU's done this over the last few years. I don't think anybody had linebacker penciled in as like a super huge need coming out of the season, out of the Pop-Tart Bowl. Jack Kelly leaves, and obviously that's a big loss. But there were guys inside that room that, had BYU not added anybody, I think everybody feels pretty okay about the state of the linebacker room, especially with Isaiah Glasser coming back. But pretty okay doesn't work anymore, right? It's a new era of BYU football. And if there's a guy, really two guys, but if there are guys the caliber of Jake Clifton and Kedu Luave who want to come to your program, Kalani Sitake is going to find a way to make those guys fit into the program, because regardless of what the depth looks like, they make your unit better. And I think you could say that really across the board. Maybe the only position group that you're looking at and saying, like, I don't know, is the running back position. But you bring back LJ Martin. He's an NFL caliber running back. And so it's not like there's nobody in the running back room. It's a pretty solid room. Maybe that's the only spot where the depth is a little bit questionable. But everywhere else, man, they've just stacked really, really good players. That's hard to do in the transfer portal era, but Kalani's done a really good job of that over these last couple of years.
Who does Kedu Luave remind you of at all?
He's got a little bit of Jack Kelly in him. He's a little bit undersized. He's really explosive. But the way that he plays, he's really versatile. He was a guy, he played a lot of safety when he was in high school, and then he put on the weight once he got into college. He's really good in coverage, but he can get into the backfield, rack up the tackles for loss. He's really good in run fits. He's just a really, really good linebacker. I don't know. I mean, the way that he gets used, it reminds me a little bit of like how BYU used Fred Warner back in the day. Cade's a different style of linebacker, and obviously Fred, you think of him now as, the all-pro NFL guy. That's not what Cade is today. But the way that he can be versatile, the way that he can drop into coverage, he can hang against those slot receivers, he can cover the big tight ends, you can dial up a blitz for Kedu Luave. If you go watch some of that 2016 film of Fred Warner when he's at BYU, and look at the versatility and look at the way that he was used, and sometimes he was rushing the passer and sometimes he was flanked out wide playing corner. That's, I think, how Kedu Luave can get used at BYU.
Talk with Jeff Hansen here on Cougar Sports Saturday and Cougar Tracks on KSLSports.com and KSL News Radio. What are your expectations for Kyler Casper? Oregon wide receiver transfers, dealt with multiple foot injuries over the past couple seasons. Injuries have plagued him. Do you think, though, there's a chance that he could maybe be this surprise and that BYU is seeing something more that nobody else maybe on the outside is seeing based on solely looking at box scores? What's your expectations for Casper?
Yeah, you look at the box scores and they kind of speak for themselves. There's not a lot there. I mean, it's hard to get really excited about it. So I think you have to dig a little bit deeper, and you have to look at the way that he was used at Oregon. Look at what Oregon tried to do, right? So let's get into our hot tub time machine. We go back in time to Casper's true freshman season. I think he played in 10 games that true freshman season. And then he's a sophomore, and he played again. No, excuse me. His true freshman season, he redshirt. Then he played in 10 or 11 games as a sophomore, got some starts. Then he started again as a junior, and that's when the injuries started to rack up. But he was in the starting lineup for those first few games of that season before he got hurt. I guess it would have been his redshirt sophomore season. Then his next year, he comes back, shakes off the foot injury. This is now last year, and he's right back in the starting lineup for Oregon, but he only plays a couple of games before he suffers another foot injury. Oregon wanted to play Kyler Casper. When he was healthy, he was a guy that Dan Lanning wanted on the field because he's a really good football player. It's all about health for Kyler Casper. Couple of foot injuries, man. I mean, everybody knows this. Foot injuries, talk to a guy like Dawson Baker. Those are hard to shake, right? I mean, that's hard to put in the rearview mirror. But if he can do it, Oregon wanted to play him. He's got all the talent in the world. He's freakishly huge at 6'6". He's super fast. If he can be healthy, he can be a weapon. The only question mark that he has, and it is an enormous question mark, is how healthy are those feet, and can he stay on the field at BYU? Really, Skylar Main, Colby Clausen, they've done a fantastic job with the sports science and all the medical stuff that BYU's done over the last couple of years. But this will be a big test for BYU's strength and conditioning staff and for that sports science crew. If they can pass this test, the Kyler Casper's a steal.
Really excited about all the potential and possibilities for this BYU football team in 2026, and it's hard to not acknowledge the popular trend that's going on TikTok and Instagram, where everyone's throwing it back to 2016 and looking what's happened over the last 10 years. And it coincides nicely with Kalani Sitake when he started out at BYU football. It is pretty remarkable, Jeff, when you think about how he's built up this program. I mean, the type of talent that BYU is adding, where you have the luxury to go add a Casper, and it's not banking on him, but man, he could be an incredible bonus because this team is just, I mean, I think you brought it up earlier. I mean, it's a different standard now at BYU. They're chasing the playoff, and these are good times for BYU.
It is, man. I mean, today, Javen Williams, he commits this week to BYU. This is a Mississippi State transfer. And Mitch, it wasn't very long ago that you and I would have looked at a Mississippi State transfer and we'd have been like, holy cow, everybody, like light up the Y. Good times are here in Provo. You never get guys like Javen Williams caliber into BYU. And I think Javen Williams is a really good player. He's a depth piece right now. I don't think he starts as a starting cornerback for BYU. And the fanfare behind his commitment was kind of ho-hum, right? Like, because that's how different it is 10 years after Kalani Sitake takes the job. To me, that's a really good barometer of how different things are in Provo compared to when Kalani was first getting here and just getting this thing started. It's a completely different program.
You can check out his work at CougarSportsInsider.com, part of the 24/7 Sports Network. And also check him out in the fall, KSL Sports Rewind team. He holds it down on high school football coverage, one of the best to do it. He's Jeff Hansen. Jeff, appreciate the time, man, and let's do this again down the road.
Appreciate you, Mitch. Thanks.
BYU basketball is back in action tonight as they get ready to take on the Texas Tech Red Raiders out in West Texas in Lubbock. Tip-off is at 6 p.m. Pre-game at 5 here on KSL. And it begins a gauntlet of a stretch on the schedule for BYU. Look, BYU's schedule has been top 100 this entire season. They've challenged themselves. They've put themselves out there. BYU has tested themselves. This is not a team that has just been getting by and playing nobody. BYU has 4 wins in quad 1 this season. They're 4-1. They've done a really good job, and they've challenged themselves. They had the win against Wisconsin, Miami. They beat Villanova to open the season, which continues as the days go by this season to be a really good win. BYU has tested themselves. Now, their win against K-State in Big 12 play, that dropped down to quad 2. But BYU has tested itself. While they've tested themselves, the schedule only levels up in a significant way beginning tonight. Here's the 10 games for BYU. Texas Tech on the road. Utah next Saturday at home. Arizona, the number 1 ranked Arizona Wildcats on Big Monday, January 26th at Kansas. At Oklahoma State, number 7 Houston on Saturday, February 7th in the Marriott Center. At Baylor, Colorado, February 14th. At Arizona, and number 2 Iowa State on Saturday, February 21st. You've got 5 ranked teams, and 4 of which are ranked in the top 10. All 5 are in the top 15. Games like Oklahoma State, quad 1. Kansas, quad 1. Colorado's a quad 2. I mean, that is the definition of the buzzsaw, the gauntlet in the Big 12. And I believe that is the toughest 10-game stretch in BYU basketball history. Look, the WAC, the Mountain West, had some excellent years. Excellent years. I remember the Mountain West at the end of the road when it was Jimmer's senior season. That was as good of a league as any league in college basketball that year. And I truly believe that. The Mountain West was outstanding from 2009 to 2011, maybe 2008 to 2011. It was outstanding years in the Mountain West. And the WAC had some big-time years, too. Those days when New Mexico was rolling, Utah, BYU, Wyoming had some great teams. BYU's been part of great leagues. West Coast never had that. They never had the depth. They always had 2 or 3 teams, and that was it. This, though, is a beast in the Big 12, and the Big 12 talent is so good this year. The talent pool, the freshman class led by A.J. DeBonsa and Darren Peterson at Kansas, who they got a big win last night against Baylor at home on a Friday night tilt. This is the toughest 10-game stretch. And if BYU is a national championship team contender, and I believe that they are, and, call me biased but I see this team up close. BYU's got the tools. They've got the ability. They've got the star power at the top of the roster. And depth is huge because you're one rolled ankle away from really having a big setback potentially with this team. But the star power, you need about 3 guys to go to the NBA to win a national title, in my opinion. BYU's got those 3 guys, AJ, Richie, and Rob Wright. This 10-game stretch will tell us a lot about BYU, and it starts tonight. And if BYU can get wins in these road environments, because at home I think they can beat anyone, even number 1 Arizona. I think BYU at the Marriott Center is one of the toughest outs in the sport with this team. They're going to be so tough to take down. But on the road, though, and it's not like it's going to sink BYU's chances, but I think that if they really want to be a Final Four team, still the math would say you got to be a 1 seed or a 2 seed. Last year was the chalkiest of chalk years in the NCAA tournament. So you're chasing a 1 seed, potentially. That's what you want to be. You want to have the best odds to go reach Indianapolis and get to the Final Four, and the best odds usually lie as a 1 seed. So you've got to go win games like tonight, where you're an underdog and you're not the favorite, but you got to show that national championship DNA in the toughest of spots, potentially to go do the thing. So it is a gauntlet. It is going to be must-see TV throughout and must listen here on KSL News Radio. We'll have all the action here on KSL News Radio and KSLSports.com, but I think it is the toughest 10-game stretch in program history. And isn't this what you dreamed of, Cougar fans? Like, think about those long winters in the West Coast Conference where you're just trying to tell yourself, yeah, this game against Pacific, man, this is dangerous. This is dangerous. BYU better bring their A game. And you're just thinking, what is this leading to? It's leading to a whole lot of nothing. Now in the Big 12, you go into the postseason and you've been battle tested. You've faced the best of the best. So then you get to the postseason, and yes, that even ramps up more, but you're ready for the battles that come with being in the NCAA tournament. We saw that last year. BYU gets to the Sweet 16. But the odds still say you got to get as high of a seed as possible. And right now, the bracketology projections say around a 3 seed. I think if you could win tonight, then you're suddenly talking about a 2 seed line in bracketology forecast for BYU. So big 10-game stretch coming up, and it starts tonight with the Texas Tech Red Raiders tip-off at 6 here on KSL. We'll take a break. There's a BYU legend who's going to be honored very soon. We'll hit on that next.
It's Cougar Sports Saturday.
That's caught! Touchdown! Stayed inside the boundary and gets in for 6.
Cougar Sports Saturday, a presentation of KSL Sports.
Richie right to the rim, driving score! He would not be denied!
BYU Sports Talk by Cougar fans for Cougar fans. Sponsored by Any Hour Services, electrical, plumbing, heating, and air. Your hosts are Mitch Harper and Kyle Ireland. On Utah's legacy home of the Cougars, KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM and 1160 AM.
Welcome back into Cougar Sports Saturday here on KSL News Radio. Hard to believe, but it's been 15 years since Jimmer Fredette last played for BYU. One of the great teams in BYU basketball history, 2011. BYU reached the Sweet 16. It's probably the year that will always go down as the greatest what if in BYU basketball history. We don't have to get into all the details. We know what happened. Brandon Davies gets suspended, and it forever leaves us wondering what if. Because I do believe if Davies plays the rest of that season, they're going to the Final Four. With how the bracket broke, BYU should have been in the Final Four. They should have been in the national championship game. Playing that what-if game just kills me. It pains me because Jimmer deserved to be in the Final Four. He was so good. Anyway, Jimmer Fredette led that 2011 team. And I bring up the fact that it's been 15 years because that is a significant benchmark for BYU legends. you need to have at least 15 years have gone by before you can be eligible to get your number retired in the rafters for a BYU program. And Jimmer Fredette, his 15 years have passed, and instantly he's getting his jersey hung in the rafters at the Marriott Center. And let's just say 100% well-deserved. Honestly, Jimmer Fredette was that type of player that you could have said one day after his career concluded at BYU, we're hanging his jersey in the rafters, and nobody in Cougar Nation would have argued with that decision. But BYU, they got some standards with the way that their processes work when it comes to a jersey retirement. And honestly, I kind of understand it. 15 years go by. How do they handle themselves after BYU, establish themselves in society, things like that? You got to be a consensus All-American. You got to win a major award. Jimmer did all of that. Wood, an award winner. Naismith. I mean, you name it, Jimmer did it. And Jimmer Fredette was incredible. And he's going to have his jersey retired on Saturday, February 14th, fitting because all of Cougar Nation loves Jimmer. He still is just an athlete. You say his name, you instantly have thoughts. And that game on February 14th at the Marriott Center is going to be a must-see now. And I'm glad that they did it for the Colorado game, because that's one of the games that really otherwise you'd say there's not much to that game. It's to me is one of the games where you probably should have a breather potentially compared to the Houstons, the Arizonas, the Baylors, the Kansases. That's a game where hopefully you can just cruise and take care of business comfortably. I remember last year against Colorado, BYU's season was on the line, so I shouldn't take anything for granted in the Big 12, but I digress. Jimmer Fredette, though, is an absolute legend. And what's special about Jimmer is that he created a fan base. Look, there's always been BYU basketball fans, but I remember quite often Dave Rose always saying when he got to Provo, remember he was with Steve Cleveland and that whole regime. He was an assistant coach under Coach Cleve. In the 97-98 season was their first year on campus. And remember, that was inheriting 1-25 and building it up brick by brick, knocking on the doors of students on campus to come up to games. But Dave Rose always talked about how, if they got fans in November and December, it was like, wow, that's a big deal. Now it doesn't matter who the opponent is. And we even saw this in the West Coast Conference in non-conference play. BYU is always getting 10,000 fans at least in non-conference play. And then in conference play, it'd be 13 plus and 15 more times not sellouts. Now in the Big 12, it's every night a sellout. Even on a 9 p.m. game earlier this week against TCU, it's a sellout. It's unbelievable. And this year's team is, one that everyone wants to see. But I believe that Jimmer Fredette's teams created an era of BYU basketball fans. I really believe that. I think there was a generation of fans that were created because of Jimmer Fredette. I've often pointed to BYU basketball history is so under-recognized compared to football. Football has so much video and so much visuals that even the young Cougar fans have seen the Jim McMahons. They've seen the Steve Youngs. But in basketball, there's not many of footage and highlight clips of Danny Ainge, of Jeff Chapman, of Michael Smith, of Kresimir Kosic, Timo Saralainen, these great BYU basketball players that just make, whether you were at the Marriott Center or you were away at home watching on TV, you connected with those guys. And for many who got to see Danny Ainge every single night in Provo, that's the GOAT. And I still think Danny Ainge is the GOAT of BYU basketball. But Jimmer Fredette he was at the moment, the intersection of TV, even though the Mountain West had the worst TV deal known to man. Still, people wanted to find a way to get there. And then there was the connection with social media, with the rise of Facebook, Twitter. You were seeing all these different social media platforms coming out in the late 2000s, early 2010s. And it just became like a phenomenon with Jimmer Fredette. And I think just that name, you hear Jimmer, you're like, that's a cool name. I want to say that. Jimmer Range. Teach me how to Jimmer. Teach me how to Jimmer. Jimmer Fredette was the man. And he just created a generation of BYU fans. And to think that, 15 years prior, in 96, 97, about 14 years prior to Jimmer's senior year, they were the worst team in college basketball. They were 1-25. And maybe at that point, the 1-25 teams, or not teams, but team, that maybe lost some fans. And at that time, too, in the 90s, Utah was the it thing in the state. They went to a Final Four in 98. They went to Sweet 16. They went to the Elite Eight. BYU was just off in the distance, doing its own thing, and really no one ever thought that BYU could do anything in the NCAA tournament. Because really what we've learned before the arrival of Kevin Young, if you don't have the best player in the land, you don't win in the NCAA tournament at BYU. Well, Jimmer, an unsuspecting 3-star recruit out of Glens Falls, New York, changes the game. And he seemed like a guy that you've played church ball with. He's a guy that you knew in your neighborhood. Once a chunky kid, evolved into an absolute assassin, a guy that just could take over a game and fill it up. And he was the nicest dude off the court. And he was a superstar. He was a celebrity, just down to earth, kindest dude, like everything you want in your type of hero athlete. And that was Jimmer Fredette. And I'm so happy that he gets the chance to have his jersey retired and gets to see that go into the rafters. And at a time, too, when, fans still have those vivid memories of what took place with Jimmer. Like, he last played 15 years ago, but I still remember so many of his games from start to finish like it was yesterday, because you just knew when you were watching him, you were watching something special. I remember the 28-point performance as a sophomore against San Diego State. I think Billy White said, man, that's a joke letting, not Billy White. I can't remember who it was. It wasn't Billy White. I don't want to misquote someone. But there was a player on San Diego State who almost was like embarrassed that they lost basically due to Jimmer Fredette. And then Jimmer, I think the next year, pours in 49 against Arizona. That was amazing. That was one of my favorite games I've ever watched of BYU basketball, period. Point, full stop. Like, that was awesome because the McKell Center, the mystique of that building, and he has the record. And he got a standing ovation from Arizona fans who know basketball. And they just tipped their cap to Jimmer Fredette. He was awesome. And the performances he had against San Diego State in that senior year when Kawhi Leonard, the heralded freshman, he's taken him down, not only in Provo, but also on Montezuma Mesa in San Diego. Those were just great games. The battles, the back and forth, it was so good. And he had BYU atop the world in college basketball as the number one team basically in the land. I know they weren't ranked number one, but it was like they were destined to be a number one seed. And then Davies gets suspended, and then they were underseeded, honestly, being a 3 seed anyway. But Jimmer is getting his jersey retired. He joins Roland Minson, Mel Hutchins, Kresimir Kosic, and Danny Ainge. I mean, that is the who's who of BYU basketball. Those are some absolute legends. Minson and Hutchins won the 1951 NIT. Kresimir Kosic changed the game not only for BYU, but maybe international basketball in general. And Danny Ainge is the GOAT. And then Jimmer, absolute stud, all-timer, can knock it down from anywhere on the floor. And he's getting his jersey retired. So cool. I cannot wait to see that. And it wasn't long ago where I remember when Steve Young got his jersey retirement. I think it was the 2003 football game against Georgia Tech. That was kind of like, whoa, BYU's retiring a jersey. Because I think for people listening, you probably remember, like, it was not commonplace where BYU is retiring anyone. And Val Hale kind of pushed for that. And you got to go read his book, Out of the Blue. He talks about stuff like that. But they did not retire jerseys. So for a guy to basically be a first ballot, 15 years have gone by, instantly go up to the rafters, that speaks to the greatness of Jimmer Fredette and how awesome he was. And absolute legend in every sense of the word, and he will be forever remembered inside one of the great buildings in college basketball at the Marriott Center, and it's well-deserved. Jimmer Fredette. February 14th, we're all going to be there watching and listening and waiting for that moment of Jimmer and his jersey going to the rafters. Let's take a break. On the other side, I'll give you my thoughts on BYU basketball coming up tonight against Texas Tech around the corner here on Cougar Sports Saturday, and it's powered by KSL Sports. Cougar Sports Saturday rolls on here on KSL News Radio, and BYU basketball goes into Texas Tech tonight looking to extend a 13-game win streak. The Cougars have the fourth longest win streak in college basketball. Nebraska has the longest at 21 games. Who would have thought that BYU, when they played that exhibition against Nebraska in Lincoln back in October, they'd be facing a team that be well into the heart of January, undefeated? That Nebraska team's really good. Miami, Ohio has an 18-game win streak. They're in action right now against Buffalo. Arizona has a 17-game win streak. They are, like Nebraska and Miami, Ohio, undefeated. Those are the three undefeated teams in college basketball right now. And then tied for fourth, BYU at 13 and UConn, the only team that beat BYU, 13 games as well. Gonzaga on 11-game win streak, Murray State at 11, Houston at 10, Miami, who BYU beat in November, they're on a 10-game win streak. They're playing Clemson right now, a team that BYU also beat. And then St. Louis, 10-game win streak as well. So BYU is up there. They're winning a lot of games, and that's what they do under Kevin Young. Over the last 30 games, BYU is 27-3 over their last 30 games. You think about the win streaks that BYU has right now. They're on a 4-game win streak in Big 12 play this season. But then you date it back to last year. After they lost to Cincinnati on February 8th, they closed out the regular season on an 8-game win streak in Big 12 play. So the Cougars in regular season Big 12 games, they've won 12 consecutive. This is a winning program, and the only time that they lose is to one of college basketball's best teams. They lost to Alabama in the Sweet 16. They lost to Houston, who eventually went on to play in the national championship last year in the Big 12 conference tournament semifinals. And then this year against UConn, who's a top 3 team in the sport. And they lost by 2. BYU goes into any game, and they've got a chance to win any game on their schedule, including tonight. And Texas Tech's really good. JT Toppin, Christian Anderson. This is a star-studded team like BYU. They've got 2 dudes. BYU's got 3, but Tech's got 2 guys that are among the top 10 in leading scorers in the Big 12. BYU's got 2 in the top 10, but they got a big 3 who on any given night can go off for big numbers. I mean, BYU's big 3 can put up 80 points in a game. That's how good they are. But I just think it's been so impressive what Kevin Young has done and is doing with BYU. You know, Kevin Young, when he stepped into this program, he wanted to level it up and take it to heights they never thought they could imagine. And he's doing that. And I think Kevin Young, too, has this amazing ability to where he kind of is a guy that came from humble beginnings, and he just worked his way to the top. And he's working his way to the top for BYU. And if he could get BYU to a Final Four or to a national championship, man, that would be one of the great stories in college basketball history. And he's got BYU in a position to go do that. I mean, they are going blow for blow with some of the great programs in this sport. Think about BYU and Kansas. Kansas, you thought when you stepped into this Big 12 that Kansas would just dominate this conference. BYU's beat them 2 times. Houston's a juggernaut in this league. BYU still hasn't beat them. They still haven't beat Texas Tech. And I think that's, something that's a little bit of a opportunity tonight. That's why this win, with all the streaks that are in front of BYU, and not that that's the end-all, be-all to extend streaks, but, to get a chance to get a win for the first time over Grant McCasland and the Texas Tech Red Raiders would be a huge step in the right direction that, once again, We all know this team's different, but it's another tangible data point that shows and emphasizes this is not your grandpa or your dad's BYU. This is a big dog program that's ready to go blow for blow with anyone. And when you know Texas Tech's rolling out a red out, they're honoring their 1996 team. That's the winningest in Texas Tech history, which oddly enough, BYU faced them back in 95, 96. This is a huge opportunity in front of BYU. And if they could get this win, this would be one of the best wins that BYU has put together since joining the Big 12 and one of the best in the Kevin Young era. But they got to go get it done tonight. Tip-off is at 6 p.m. right here on KSL. Let's take a break. We'll get to know the Texas Tech Red Raiders next with Nathan Geese from the Lubbock Avalanche Journal next here on Cougar Sports Saturday.
It's Cougar Sports Saturday.
That's caught! Touchdown! Stayed inside the boundary and gets in for 6.
Cougar Sports Saturday, a presentation of KSL Sports.
Richie right to the rim, driving score! He would not be denied!
BYU Sports Talk by Cougar fans for Cougar fans. Sponsored by Any Hour Services, electrical, plumbing, heating, and air. Your hosts are Mitch Harper and Kyle Ireland. On Utah's legacy home of the Cougars, KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM and 1160 AM.
Big time matchup in the Big 12 Top 15 showdown taking place in Lubbock, and BYU versus Texas Tech. Feels like it's whenever these two programs and athletic departments meet, it's a big game, and that's what's going to be happening on the hardwood at the USA United Supermarkets Arena in West Texas. Tip off at 6, 7 o'clock in Central Time Zone right here on KSL News Radio. You can watch the game on ESPN. And to get the lowdown on the Red Raiders, joined now by Texas Tech basketball beat writer Nathan Geese of the Lubbock Avalanche Journal. And Nathan, a little bit over the midway point of this season for Texas Tech, how would you assess how this year has gone for year 3 under Grant McCasland?
Yeah, it's kind of been a wonky year just because they've had so many injuries that beyond JT Toppin, they haven't had their full front court rotation. So they've had to go pretty small a lot of the year. They're trying to get those guys back. Luke Bamboye, the shot blocking VCU transfer, he's kind of the big one that they're missing right now. But then Josiah Mosley, the Villanova transfer, he's supposed to provide some more depth at the forward spot at least, or even play a smaller 5 guy. He hasn't played all year. So, and they've had a lot of injuries with the guard rotation too. Tyree Bryan's been kind of in and out too. Jalen Petty missed a game or two because he broke his nose, but he's been pretty good as a freshman throughout this year. They're finding their way right now, and I think you kind of look at the record. It's not sterling, but every loss is to a team that's ranked ahead of them in every poll out there. They had the win over Duke. They kind of blew that game against Houston a little bit. They probably should have got that one, but Houston's really good. And it was on the road. You're not going to shake your head too much at that one. They're in a spot right now, though, where they're starting to find their cohesiveness on the defensive end of the floor because they had guys together more consistently, and that's really shined. They ranked, I believe Bart Torvik has them 5th or 6th in the nation defensively over the last month, and that was a really big problem for them in the first month. So they're starting to find that, and they're also trying to find some identity of outside of JT Toppin and Christian Anderson offensively. You kind of know what you're going to get from those two, but you need other guys to be able to kind of step up. And Donovan Atwell's done a really good job of helping out there. Jalen Petty and LaJuan Watts, he can kind of hit or miss sometimes offensively, but if he can kind of get going, that's a really strong number 3 for him.
And that's a great breakdown on this Tech team to this point. And I'm curious, with compared to last year's Elite 8 team, what is the maybe biggest difference stylistically, if at all, for this year's group in your vantage point?
There's not a huge difference because what they kind of did was they looked at last year's team and the guys they were going to lose and basically just tried to find kind of replicas of who those guys were. So like Chance McMillan, Kerwin Walton, those were supposed to be Donovan Atwell and Tyree Bryan. You lose Darian Williams, LaJuan Watts is basically like, hey, he can do the exact same kind of thing, just on a different kind of level, different experience level there. And then Federico, that's the Bamboye, but injuries they factor into all this. It's not reaching the same level as what that team was, but you also have to kind of consider Tech wasn't that level all year. They hit that level at about this time last year when they started getting all these guys together a little bit more. Like last year, JT missed like all of December with an ankle injury, and it took him a little while to kind of get going. But once he popped off, he just kind of kept ascending throughout the year. That's kind of what they're hoping now this year. The big thing right now is they need to get more out of Tyree Bryan. He's the Santa Clara transfer, supposed to be a 3-and-D guy. He's had a couple injuries that have kind of sidelined him and just hampered his development in the system. But if they can get him to a level that they kind of expected before the year, especially on the defensive end, that can take them a long way. They just don't have that right now. It's still kind of a work in progress, and as they kind of get more bodies together on the floor.
Getting a lowdown on the Texas Tech Red Raiders with Nathan Geese. You can check out his bylines. The Lubbock Avalanche Journal. Number 1 3-point shooting team in the Big 12 is Texas Tech. How big of a piece is 3-point shooting to the identity of this team and their success?
Well, they absolutely have to have it, because if anything, you need that shooting to take attention away from the paint so JT Toppin can kind of operate. But what they're really trying to do is they're trying to spread you out even more with JT. What he has not been hitting threes like he did last year. He was never a great 3-point shooter, but it was something that could kind of keep teams honest. Entering the game on Wednesday against Utah, he was 4 for 27. It was not a thing you kind of wanted to see from him. But then he went 3 for 4. Graham McCaslin kind of said JT's been working really hard and getting a softer shot from 3. And if that can kind of open things up, that opens up the paint for Lawan Watts to kind of operate and drive into the lane. Christian Anderson to kind of get into the lane there. They need the 3-point shooting. It's mainly Atwell and Anderson. They're both above 40%. Petty's a pretty good 3-point shooter too. But he's on the smaller side, so he's not going to be able to get shots off as consistently. And he's kind of that 4th or 5th option most of the time when he's on the floor. But they need the 3 to open up the paint for Toppin, and that's where he can really cook.
You brought it up earlier that, Bart Torvik metrics have Texas Tech's one of the best defensive teams as of late. This is a little bit of a forecast. If you had to get into the mind of Coach McCaslin, who do you think they throw at AJ DeBonsa for BYU to try to slow him down? Because every game he's been getting his, no matter the circumstances, it seems.
Yeah, that's kind of the tricky thing, is that I think so. Donovan Atwell is the one that's usually assigned to the opponent's number 1 wing guard offensive threat. So you're probably going to see him on DeBanza most of the time. The question then becomes, how do you kind of handle Richie Saunders? Because he kind of plays that wing forward. He can kind of spread you out, and they don't really have a great option there defensively. That's where having a guy like Tyree Bryan, if he could make that jump, that would really help you. But you're probably not going to be expecting that for this one. So I would kind of expect Watts to kind of get Saunders there and then kind of fill in the rest and figure it out. But I would expect Atwell to get the DeBanza assignment.
I'm curious, what's a big game atmosphere like at USA, United Supermarkets Arena? I'm sure BYU fans will have a little bit of a presence there. They always seem to find their way into these road venues, but it's going to be obviously a rocking environment, I would imagine. But for people that haven't experienced it, how would you describe these big game atmospheres at USA?
Well, I think BYU and Kansas are the only ones that have arenas that can kind of match how many seats United Supermarkets Arena has. So it's a little bit similar to that, but it's loud when they got the students there, which they do now. It's raucous. I mean, they had JT Toppin jersey giveaway night the other night, and that place was loud it was Utah. And Utah wasn't a great marquee draw, but whenever you get a marquee opponent here, you really feel the energy of the building, and it's something that has really contributed to the last couple of years, because you kind of need that crowd support, that energy to get your team going. And that's something that Tech really feeds off of on the home environment.
Last thing for you, Nathan. Again, Nathan Geese of the Lubbock Avalanche Journal. Check out all of his work leading up to tip-off and in-game and post-game at the Lubbock Avalanche Journal. This is kind of a big picture question with BYU and Texas Tech, because I brought it up earlier with the football game. That was a big one. Massive game, Big 12 championship, and the regular season game in Lubbock. Do you think these two athletic departments can maybe be the bell cows of the Big 12 potentially? Because it just seems like the commitment both off the field, on the court, I mean, the coaching staff, retaining, it seems like these athletic departments do it better than nearly anyone in the Big 12 right now. Do you think this could have long-term continuity with these two athletic departments if you had to have a crystal ball and gaze into it?
Well, I think that's kind of the idea, because once Texas and Oklahoma left for the SEC, the league basically needed at least one school, maybe two or three, to kind of up their game and say, hey, we're going to kind of lead the charge here. And I think if you just look at Texas Tech, I mean, right now it's kind of an insane time at Texas Tech. I mean, obviously the run to the Orange Bowl, the college football playoff, Big 12 championship against BYU. Men's basketball has been consistent the last few years under McCaslin. Right now, the women's basketball team's undefeated and ranked in the top 20. And then we got softball season coming up, and they got a national championship favorite on there. It's a time where Texas Tech is really putting its stamp on, this is what we expect every year. We want to be this team. And it's going to change for different sports. Like Arizona is obviously pretty dang consistent for men's basketball. Kansas is, they can kind of figure it out with this new era. South's kind of struggled there, but they're always going to kind of be there. But if you're looking at across the board sports, I do think Texas Tech and BYU are kind of neck and neck and trying to figure out who's going to be the top dog in this new era.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Saturday, tip-off, 6 o'clock Mountain, 7 o'clock Central Time. Pregame here on KSL begins at 5. Nathan, appreciate the breakdown. Looking forward to your coverage inside the USA, and we'll talk again hopefully down the road when Texas Tech comes to Provo later this season.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Cougar Sports Saturday here on KSL News Radio, and I'm your BYU Insider Mitch Harper. Having a blast on this Saturday afternoon with all of you. Riding solo, my co-host Kyle Ireland out this week. He'll be back next weekend here on the program as we get ready for BYU and Utah next week. Cougar's going to host the Utes at the Marriott Center. That's a 3:30 p.m. tip-off next week against Utah. Tonight, though, it's BYU and Texas Tech tip at 6. Pregame at 5 here on KSL. And here's the availability report for BYU basketball. The players that are out for tonight's game: Brody Kozlowski, we know that. He's dealing with a significant injury that's more severe than initially expected. That, according to Kevin Young a couple weeks ago. KJ Perry, the new number 1 JUCO prospect, he's going to redshirt this season. That's expected. Nate Pickens, he's been out since before the year. He's redshirting, going to be back next season. And then Dawson Baker, of course, out for the season. The other player that's out is Xavier Staten, 7-foot center. He's out for this game. Second consecutive game. He will be out on the availability report. Undisclosed reason for Xavier Staten. He was at the game on Wednesday against TCU in that win on the bench, sitting there with his teammates in street clothes. One guy that's not on the availability report is Abdullah Bidu Ahmed. Bidu missed the TCU game due to a shoulder injury. That, according to Kevin Young, he is not on this availability report, and that gives BYU a backup center to Keba Keita as BYU gets ready to take on a Texas Tech team that boasts the reigning Big 12 Player of the Year in JT Toppin. So you need a full collection of big men to get ready for this game against the Red Raiders. You've also got Mihailo Boskovic, who's going to be good to go for this one. He's had some good games in recent outings, I think. Mihailo's done a nice job. He had that big 3 against TCU. He had that really strong performance in the Big 12 opener against Kansas State. I like what Mihailo has been providing to BYU as of late. And then Hadim Boop, primarily a 4 guy, and we've seen him play the 4 with Keba Keita on the floor as of late in the last 2 games. But he's a great rebounder, and he can get after it on the glass for BYU. He had 6 rebounds in the second half in the win against TCU. So pretty good, list of availability. Again, you're getting to the guts of Big 12 play. Guys are getting banged up, and this is going to be kind of what Kalani would call in football an empty the tank kind of game, because you've got a week off. You don't play again until next Saturday against Utah. There's no midweek game coming up. This is a spot where you can really let it all out, empty that tank, give it your all to go get this win against Texas Tech, because then you got a week off to get ready for the Utes. And KY's smart too with the way that he handles these players. It's not, practices are tough, they're intense, but he's also smart. He wants these guys ready for the games. He treats them like pros. And so this is a good spot for BYU if they can somehow pull off this upset. I shouldn't say an upset, but they are an underdog. If they pull off the win as a road dog, that'd be a huge win for this team. For Texas Tech, the most notable guy that's out, Luke Bamboye. Remember, he was a name that BYU faced last season. Bamboye, a 6'11", 220-pound big man out of London. He was on last year's VCU team. He started for the VCU Rams that BYU, of course, beat VCU in the NCAA tournament. Bamboye hasn't played for Texas Tech. He's been primarily a little bit of a starter. He started, a handful of games this year for the Red Raiders, but he suffered an injury and has been out since December 16th. So pretty noteworthy loss, or not loss, but absence for Texas Tech. And maybe we see him at the back end of the season, because these two teams will meet again coming up on March 7th to close out the regular season when BYU hosts Texas Tech on Senior Day. But first, it's in Lubbock, Texas tonight at the USA United Supermarkets Arena between BYU and Tech. Coming up on the other side, I'll give you my three-pointer. Some players, some stats, some key bold predictions for this top 15 clash in the Big 12 between BYU and Texas Tech, right here on Cougar Sports Saturday.
It's Cougar Sports Saturday.
That's caught! Touchdown! Stayed inside the boundary and gets in for 6.
Cougar Sports Saturday, a presentation of KSL Sports.
Richie right to the rim, driving score! He would not be denied!
BYU Sports Talk by Cougar fans for Cougar fans. Sponsored by Any Hour Services, electrical, plumbing, heating, and air. Your hosts are Mitch Harper and Kyle Ireland. On Utah's legacy home of the Cougars, KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM and 1160 AM.
It's BYU basketball game day here on KSL News Radio, and we're counting down until BYU takes on Texas Tech tonight. Tip-off at 6, pregame at 5, right here on KSL. It's a big game. Top 15 clash, number 11 BYU versus number 15 Texas Tech. Strange to think that on a 13-game win streak, BYU goes from number 9 down to number 11 in this week's AP Top 25. And Cougs got a chance tonight if they can get a win on the road against the top 15 team. The pollsters will have to respect BYU and bump them up and get them climbing up the rankings, especially, too, with Vanderbilt losing this week. They were one of the teams that jumped BYU in this past week's poll, and then also Nebraska, who remains undefeated as well. It's okay. Still think, though, BYU should be much higher than 11, considering they have one of the best rosters in college basketball. They've won 13 straight, and their lone loss is to the number 3 team in the country without 2 of their starters. Still, the great thing about the Big 12 is that you don't have to worry too much about the politicking like we do in football, where it's like you got to get style points, you got to make a case, you got to politic. Basketball kind of takes care of itself. You got Texas Tech, you got Kansas, you got Baylor, you got Houston, you got Arizona, all these games that BYU has coming up. You just win these games, it takes care of itself, and you're in position to achieve everything you want to in the upcoming season here. So it's BYU and Texas Tech. Massive game. Huge opportunity for BYU. Let's dive into the three-pointer. A deep dive look into today's matchup with some stats, some players, and some bold predictions for today's game. We'll start off with the stat of the day. 39.4%. That's Texas Tech three-point percentage in Big 12 play. The Red Raiders are number 1 in Big 12 conference play, shooting the three ball. They're shooting it at a high clip. BYU, by comparison, they're at 31.7% in Big 12 play, and the last two games have not been pretty. Most of that number is carried by the performance they had against Arizona State last week. Against Utah last Saturday, BYU shot 23% from beyond the arc. On Wednesday against TCU, they were 5 of 24. That's 20% from three-point range. They had one three-pointer in the first half against the Horned Frogs. That has to change. You cannot shoot the three that poorly against Texas Tech. If you're going to win this game, and it's not like BYU needs to play perfect to win this game. This team's got a margin for error. This is not like other BYU teams in the past where you had to be flawless to win a game. This team has the ability to overcome hurdles and win games. You saw that on Wednesday against TCU, which was a really good win when you consider all the hurdles in front of BYU, and they still came out on top. But on the road, I think you got to hit the three. It's just a great equalizer, and it's one that can really quiet down the crowd. When you hit a clutch three, if Richie Saunders buries a big shot, it's a silencer. Rob Wright with a big three gets the bucket. I mean, those sort of things can help the cause for BYU to get this win. And Tech has just shown they shoot the three at a high clip. And as you heard earlier from the Texas Tech insider Nathan Geese, it's kind of following a similar blueprint to last year's Texas Tech team, where they started to find their stride around this point of the season. You look at the record with Texas Tech and you think, 4 losses at the midway point, they're not that good. This is still a program that could be good enough to get to the Final Four. They are that talented. Last year, they were moments away from reaching the Final Four. They got ousted in the Elite Eight. It's a really good team. So if BYU could get this one, it would be a really impressive effort. I'd also add another stat here. BYU, 74.8%. That's BYU's free throw percentage this season. They're 82nd nationally from the charity stripe. Not bad. Could be better, but not bad. On the flip side, Texas Tech, 68.9%. That's 282nd nationally. That's not good. And in a game like this one, where I think it's going to be a tight game, free throws are going to play a big role. And I think BYU clearly has the edge there. So maybe if Tech's got the advantage on threes, BYU can make up for that at the free throw line. And AJ DiBonsa, he can get to the charity stripe. Players to watch. Of course, AJ, he's one. Richie Saunders, though. I think Richie Saunders has got to have a big-time game in this one. Get Richie Saunders type buckets where generating a steal, fast break to the rim, those sort of plays, hitting the open threes when he's got them. He's going to get looks because who defends Richie Saunders? You want to pick your poison with AJ, with Rob Wright? He's going to have opportunities. Richie's got to knock down the threes. I don't want to see a performance shooting the three as he had against Kansas State earlier in Big 12 play. If he hits the three ball at a high clip, BYU is going to win this game. So Richie is critical for this team because he is, I don't want to call him an X factor because he's a superstar. He's one of the best players in the Big 12. But Richie, if he could have a 25-point night, I feel very good about BYU's chances to win this game. For Texas Tech, I'm going to go with Lawan Watts. Now, they got the stars in JT Toppin, the reigning Big 12 Player of the Year, and Christian Anderson, who is a dynamite guard. Christian Anderson, remember, he came off the bench last year against BYU in Tech's win at the Marriott Center. Only one of 2 teams who has defeated Kevin Young-led BYU inside the Marriott Center. So this is a good Tech program. But Christian Anderson came off the bench last year. He was in relief of Hawkins, who was their starting guard a season ago. Christian Anderson's a superstar. He's an outstanding player for Texas Tech. But Lawan Watts is interesting because he is a carbon copy statistically of Darian Williams. And Darian Williams last year killed BYU late. And Lawan Watts, a Washington State transfer, really good rebounder, gets assists. He does a lot of things well for Texas Tech, but he's also had games this season where he can fill it up too. So keep an eye out for him, Lawan Watts. He's a good player for Texas Tech. And again, BYU, Richie Saunders, he's my player to watch in this game. Bold predictions for this one. BYU commits less than 5 turnovers in this game. At times in Big 12 play, BYU's been prone to making more mistakes than I've grown accustomed to with this group. In non-conference play, turnovers weren't an issue for this team. But I think they get back to that today. Texas Tech statistically 275th nationally in forcing turnovers. They're not great. That's not their calling card. So BYU doesn't beat themselves and make dumb miscues. Pretty good chance they're going to take care of the basketball and not have a high turnover number, and you're going to get opportunities to get up shots. And as Kevin Young talks about, basketball is a math equation. If you can get more shot attempts than your opponent, you can maybe overcome some maybe shooting woes if you have them, if you can get more attempts. And when you have fewer turnovers, you're probably going to be in a position to have a lot more field goal attempts every single possession. But I'm going to say bold, BYU commits less than 5 turnovers in this game against the Red Raiders. Coming up on the other side, let's take our final break. I'll give you my score prediction next for BYU versus Texas Tech. It's the game of the day in college basketball today. It's a big one. Will the Cougs get it done? I'll tell you next here on Cougar Sports Saturday. It's powered by KSL Sports. Final segment here on Cougar Sports Saturday today. Appreciate all of you for being on board to this show, however you were listening throughout the day. If you missed any part of the program, subscribe to the podcast. Just search Cougar Sports Saturday wherever you get your podcast. And also subscribe to Cougar Tracks, which, of course, you can listen to daily here on KSL News Radio at 6:30 p.m. every weeknight here on the Legacy home of the Cougars. And, of course, on podcast and video on the KSL Sports YouTube page. So I stay busy throughout the week, 6 days a week, putting out BYU content, talking to you through these airwaves, and I love every second of it. It's a dream job for me. I love this gig. It's so much fun. And on days like this, it makes it even more fun talking BYU basketball as they get ready for a massive game against Texas Tech. It's a quad one opportunity. BYU is 4-1 in quad one games this season, and Texas Tech, if you could get this one, it'd be the biggest win of the season to date for the Cougars. And let's dive into my score prediction for this game. I've got BYU winning this game. BYU 82, Texas Tech 79. A little bit lower scoring than maybe you would think with these two teams that have high-powered offenses. BYU's defense got a little nasty to them, a little toughness to them. That I think it goes a little bit unrecognized by people that just look at, BYU from a 10,000-foot view. I thought that TCU game showed some toughness in this BYU group. In those first 10 minutes against TCU, they only allowed 14 points. When TCU looked like they were playing with so much confidence, they had a 8-point lead on BYU, and it looked like this could be a night where BYU falls at home when they shouldn't. They tightened up defensively and put the hammer down on the Horned Frogs, and that was with an A.J. DeBonsa who was under the weather. And, of course, Richie Saunders. I think Rob Wright's been excellent for BYU. Kennard Davis gave some valuable minutes defensively. I just like what BYU's becoming on the defensive end. Still, their identity to their core is going to be on the offensive end. I mean, this team is a high-powered offensive juggernaut. There's nights where they can just, again, 3 guys can get 80 points. That's how good this BYU team is. And if you can get, 7 to 8 points from the bench, you're talking about maybe a 100-point night potentially from this team. And Keba Keita's healthier than where he's been the past few weeks with the illness and the ankle. I like where BYU's at right now. I just think this team comes in loose tonight. I think they play with a lot of confidence. And I think one of the big keys is they got to jump out to a fast start. If they can do that and they can get to the midway point of the first half with either a lead or be within 2 points, 4 points, somewhere in there, I think that sets up well for BYU because it's become, I don't want to say just a flash in the pan, but it's like, it's who they are. They're great in the second half. Against TCU, A.J. DeBonsa, under the weather, he was brilliant. It was a masterclass in just, this dude's a superstar. I mean, this guy is taking over the game when he needs to. And Grant McCasland, head coach for Texas Tech, was so complimentary of A.J. DeBonsa, both in his coach's show and media availability this week, because Grant McCasland worked with Team USA. A.J. was part of that team that went to Switzerland with FIBA under 19, and A.J. was the MVP, helped that team get to a gold medal. But McCasland was super complimentary of A.J. and how he's just a team guy, and he'll pick his spots when he needs to take over, but he lifts up everyone around him. And that's what he's going to have to do tonight. And, he was that on Wednesday where he wasn't at full strength, and he had that hard fall on the floor. I mean, it was just a tough night where he easily could have chalked it up and said, hey, it's just not your night. Just move on to the next one. It's okay. But he wouldn't allow that. Like, he's got that mentality that very few athletes do. And that's what makes A.J. DeBonsa special. And every single night he just delivers. And it might not always be the flashy slam dunks as he had against Abilene Christian. It might not be the triple doubles. It might not be a 3-point shooting night, but he always, you can count on, he is going to get to the line. He's going to knock down his free throws. He's going to have an elite midi game. And that was one of the things on Wednesday that kind of took me back was, you knew he was under the weather a little bit when he's missing middies, because his mid-range game is top shelf. You're going to find very few players in the world that are better than A.J. DeBonsa in the mid-range game. But I think A.J. has a big night. I think BYU defensively shows some toughness and some grit that makes a statement nationally like, hey, you guys have been disrespecting us in the polls. Start ranking us higher where we should be. And I think if you get a win at Lubbock, a hyper-energized crowd that it's going to be with a red out tonight, I think BYU finds a way to get it done. JT Toppin's going to be a handful. I think he's going to get his. I mean, he's so hard to just contain. He's like AJ where he's automatically going to probably get at least 18 to 20 points. But I think Keba Keita is going to make him work for a full 40. It's not going to be easy because Keita is such a unique talent and athlete. And I love where he's kind of gaining some momentum because his in and out availability has been tricky, where he dealt with the injury against UConn and then the illness and then the ankle. Now we're starting to see Keita gain some momentum where he's stacking up games and he's playing at a high level. And I think that battle of the post is going to be a lot of fun to watch, and he's going to make Toppin work for 40 minutes. Again, Toppin's elite. He is an incredible big man in college basketball, and he's going to get his more times than not. But I think Keita's got the talent to throw a lot at him and make him challenge, and Bidu as well. Bidu's a shot blocker, and I think that's going to be some good battles in the post to really challenge JT Toppin. So I'm going to go with BYU gets it done. 82-79. I think BYU shoots it at a good clip from the three-point range. I think the defense kind of keeps Texas Tech below their 39% average from beyond the arc in three-point range. So I'm going to say BYU 82, Texas Tech 79. What say you? Texas 57500. Give us your score prediction. Do you think BYU gets it done tonight inside United Supermarkets Arena? They're only one of two teams in the Big 12, Texas Tech and Houston, that BYU basketball has not defeated since joining the Big 12 in 2023. Chance to take down the Red Raiders, who seem to have BYU's number in everything right now. Football, they win in Lubbock. They win in the Big 12 championship game. They took down BYU last year in the Marriott Center. Now it's 2026. 2025, it was all Texas Tech. 2026, it starts anew. And BYU's got the chance to get on the upper hand on the Red Raiders, who are a really good basketball team, and it'd be a huge win for BYU, but I think they're going to get it done. 82-79 is my score prediction. That's going to do it for this edition of Cougar Sports Saturday. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast, and we will be back next week for BYU basketball pregame coverage of their game against rival Utah next Saturday right here on KSL. So tune in then. We'll talk to you next time here on Cougar Sports Saturday, and it's powered by KSL Sports.